Thank everybody for coming this evening. Just want to remind you of other Earth Week activities here at the library. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, we're going to have Susan Schuler from Recycling Connections in Stevens Point to talk about recycling. And people have been doing recycling for a long time, but there's still more to learn. So hope you can come back tomorrow evening. And then on Saturday, we're going to have an award-winning documentary called Biggest Little Farm. That's going to be shown here at the library at 1:30 on Saturday. Okay, before I introduce our presenter this evening, I just want to let you know who our partners are for putting this together. And one of our partners is Clean Grid Action. I'm the chair of that group. If you want more information, we have a table outside here with information about our organization. Or you can check us out on our web page or our Facebook page. And for you techie people out there, if you just want to take a picture of this, you can you'll be able to find more information about our organization. Oh, did you get a chance to? You got it? Okay. All right. Also, other sponsors of this evening's presentation are the League of Women Voters, both here in Wisconsin Rapids and in Stevens Point. And so, as it says here, the League is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in the government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. And once again, if you need more information about the League, here's a code you could take a picture of. So I think that's it for the intros here. So now I'm going to introduce our presenter for this evening, who is Francisco Seu. He's the Emerging Technologies Director of Renew Wisconsin. He drove up from Madison to give us this presentation this evening. Before joining Renew, Francisco serves as the program manager for the Focus on Energy's New Construction Solution, a statewide program that empowers the people and businesses of Wisconsin to make decisions that save energy and money. In addition to his work at Renew, he is the founder of Bike Equity, a nonprofit organization that provides resources, mentorship, and education so that everyone can enjoy cycling regardless of income, age, race, or ability. Francisco has a master's in sustainable systems engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has dedicated his career to advancing energy efficiency and renewable energy. So let's welcome Francisco.
Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you for that generous introduction. I'm going to turn this mic off so I don't get any feedback, if I can. Oh, you got it off? Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I grew up in Colombia, and I moved to Wisconsin about 18 years ago for college to attend the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I fell in love with the state. I never left. Have a family here, and I love every opportunity I get to drive around Wisconsin. It's a beautiful state, and I feel very lucky to be here, so I appreciate the invitation. I like to keep things somewhat informal, so if at some point I say something that doesn't make any sense, or if I'm speaking too fast or too slow, or you don't understand me, feel free to raise your hand and stop me, and we can clarify that. Again, thank you for being here. I hope this is informative. So with that, we're going to be talking about clean energy and the opportunities that we have in Wisconsin to improve our quality of life through clean energy. And on that, if you have time to talk to me at the end, I have a book recommendation for you, and I would actually love to make this recommendation to the library. This book is called Rural Renaissance. It was published maybe last year, and it has a lot of great stories about examples on how we have used clean energy in the past to uplift people and to create a better lifestyle for people. It's not the first time so we have this opportunity now with renewable energy and all these things that we're going to be talking about today, but this is not the first time we do that. So it's really nice to have the examples of how it has been done in the past, to think about the opportunities that we have in the future. So happy to pass it around after that. I also have an electric vehicle charging station here for display because I'm going to be talking about electric vehicles. So if you have never seen an electric vehicle charging station and you're curious on what that looks like, feel free to come and see it. You can touch it and all that stuff. All right. So before I start, a word about my employer. I have to talk about Renew because I have my favorite job. So Renew is a nonprofit organization. We have been around for over 30 years, and we're dedicated to building a stronger, healthier, and more vibrant Wisconsin through the advancement of renewable energy. We work on policies and programs that support solar power, wind power, small hydro, geothermal, and also electric vehicles. We support electric vehicles, even though it's not renewable energy, because electrifying our transportation opens the opportunity to power our transportation with energy that we can generate here in the state. So that's the reason why electric vehicles are such a big part of this conversation, because electric vehicles will give us the opportunity to generate our own fuel, basically. So here's what's on the presentation. And I have prepared about 30 minutes, and then we can have a discussion for as long as you want. We're going to be talking about why clean energy, and then the federal clean energy investments that everybody's talking about now, and how some of those investments are public investments and some will support private investments, and particularly the bipartisan infrastructure law, or some people refer to it as the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. And that has two pieces that we're going to be discussing in depth here. The first one is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and the second one is the Clean School Bus Program, my favorite program ever. And then we're going to move into the Inflation Reduction Act, and for that we're going to focus on the electrification of buildings and the electric vehicles, and then we'll open it for discussion. All right? All right, this graph is very, very complicated. This is a very, very, very complicated picture. In fact, I have to kind of fight with my communications people when I put it in a presentation, because they go like, no, people are not gonna like that. And I push back because I know you're going to get it. We're gonna spend a couple of minutes talking about this. So my background is in engineering, and I love numbers, and I love energy stuff, so I kind of like go deep into this thing. And to me, it's like one of my favorite days of the year is when the Lawrence Laboratory releases this graph. They do one for every year, and they release it, and that day I'm like, oh my goodness, there is a new one. This one is from 2019. And they do one for every year, but they run a couple of years back because they have to collect the data, and they do it for the state, so for the entire country, and they do one for Wisconsin. The newest one we have for Wisconsin is from 2019, but the numbers have not changed that much. So these numbers are still relevant for our conversation today. And this is called a Hankey diagram, and what it's doing is it looks at the energy flows through our economy. So on this side, you have our energy generation. This is where our energy comes from. This is how the energy moves through the economy, and that's what we get at the end. So I know it's complicated, but we're going to focus on just a few things here. You can ignore the rest. Let's focus on that last green bar at the bottom, where it says 9.6 billion. We're just going to focus on that. Forget the rest. That is the amount of money that we spend buying petroleum products, gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel for the state of Wisconsin every year. So every year, we spend almost $10 billion buying gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and we have to send that money out of the state because we don't produce any of that in Wisconsin, right? So we buy 10 billion, and then we use most of that for our transportation sector. So that $10 billion goes to power our transportation sector right here, right? But most of our cars have engines, right? And then when you put the fuel, some of that energy in the engine goes to move the wheels. Some of that energy goes out of the exhaust pipe, or it just gets lost as heat, because engines are really good at making heat, right? But when you get in your vehicle, most times, I guess the winter is probably an exception, but most of the time, you're looking to go from point A to point B. You don't want to get warm. So that heat that the vehicle is generating is kind of a waste, right? And that's what's showing here. So if we take that amount of fuel and we put a value on the services that we're getting from that fuel, we are wasting $8.1 billion that are just going out of smoke pipes to heat up the environment, right? So the reason I like showing this graph is because in a way it shows you the magnitude of the issue that we have here, the size of the problem that we have. We buy a lot of energy in different forms, and at the end of the day, we end up throwing away 3/4 of it. It just becomes waste. These numbers add up, and they add up quickly. We could replace a big portion of that $10 billion or $9.6 billion with solar and wind energy that we generate in the state. Does that make sense? Because when we send that money out of the state, we don't see those dollars anymore. And some of that, the majority of that, in fact, is actually becoming waste. All right. Thank you for humoring me with this one. I know this one it's a lot, but I like showing it because it gives me at least gives me a nice idea of, okay, what do the numbers say? Okay. So just to summarize all that, most of what I'm going to say here today, I'm saying it because I am convinced that we need to transition from the current fossil fuel economy that we have today, because we're wasting 64 cents out of every dollar that we spend on energy. It just becomes waste. And in total, we spend about $14 billion a year. So when you look at petroleum products, that 9.6 billion I show you, and then you add propane and other fuels, it's about $14 billion that go out of the state every year to purchase fuels that we don't have here. We could keep some of those dollars in the state. That's the reason I'm going to be talking about the stuff that I'm going to say from now on. The main reason. So, federal clean energy investments. I want to see a show of hands if you heard about the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Have you heard about the bipartisan infrastructure law? Yeah, so the two big bills for clean energy, right? The big difference between those two is that one focuses on public investments, that is the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the other one is really there to support private investments. And we're going to go through that. What does that mean for you? What's available? We're going to go through all that in detail. Let's start with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is the public investment program. What that is $550 billion to support infrastructure, to basically rebuild the country and to build new stuff, for bridges, for passenger and freight trail, for public transit, for airports, for ports, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and then for safety. For the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to be focusing on public transit and electric vehicle charging. We could spend a whole 3 hours talking about all of them, but we don't have that kind of time. So we're going to be focusing on those two. So let's start with electric vehicle. So in the infrastructure law, the federal government has set aside $7.5 billion to build electric vehicle charging infrastructure throughout the country. So $5 billion of that is what the government called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or the NEVI program. And that is to build fast charging stations along the interstate highways, very similar to like gas stations, if you will. So when you think about what the government's going to do with that $5 billion is they're going to build a network of charging stations that are basically similar to gas stations, just for electric vehicles, mostly on highways. And there is also a $2.5 billion, which is competitive funding. So that has not been assigned to anybody. Government, local government, county government, state government can go and compete and put proposals and say, we want to build electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and we want to use some of that money, and they can potentially tap into those dollars. And I'm going to show you an example of that. And then the other program under that infrastructure law is the Clean School Bus Program. And that is a $5 billion program to transition all diesel buses to zero emission or low emission buses. And I'm going to be talking about that in detail. So the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or the NEVI program, is a formula program. And formula only means that the government took that $5 billion and divided that for the states. So the government says each state is going to get this amount. Wisconsin is going to receive $78.6 million out of that $5 billion pot. So we have guaranteed almost $80 million to build electric vehicle charging stations along these interstate corridors, the ones in green in that map. So by the end of 2030, is kind of the estimate, that's the timeline, we should have about 60 to 62 fast charging stations along those highways. We do have some of the charging stations that look like what the government is going to build by the end of 2030. I want if you guys can guess how many we have. We're going to have about 62. How many do you think we have right now?
4.
4. You read the plan.
No, I'm just guessing.
Good. You said 6? That was close. So we have 4 charging stations in the state that meet the requirements. So we have a lot more electric vehicle charging stations than that. We have over 1,000 spread across the states, right? But only 4 of those meet the requirement that the government has specified for that program, right?
So it says on there that it's approved. Does that mean our Department of Transportation has actually committed to doing this?
Yes.
The state legislature is actually.
Well, the state legislature is not involved at this point.
Okay.
So when the federal government designed the program, they tasked the state DOTs, the State Department of Transportation. They said, you, Department of Transportation, write a plan and tell me how you're going to use your allocated funds. For Wisconsin is, how are you going to use $78.6 million? And that was due back in August of 2022. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation submitted a plan, 100 pages. You can go to the website and read it if you want. And it got approved last fall. So now we have, the federal government gave Wisconsin a green light. You have your dollars. Now, that is a 5-year program, and there are some requirements that need to be met as the program is implemented. So, we're not done. Like we have green light to go after the money, but it's a process. The next step is for Wisconsin DOT to offer that money to private investors to go out and build these charging stations. This is an 80%, it's a 20% match program, which means the federal government will pay 80% of the cost of building the charging station, and then whoever will own the project have to put 20%. So, if you have a gas station operator in town who is interested in building one of these charging stations, they can go to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and say, hey, we want to build a charging station. They will, if the DOT agrees, the federal government will pay 80%. Yeah. Right. That is a good question. And I think other people are thinking that way, and we might start to see those projects. There is one manufacturer out there, one car maker that they have the largest charging station network. And they are not easy, but they're more likely to have charging stations at hotels. So you check in, you plug in your vehicle, you go to sleep, and the next morning you go out and your vehicle is fully charged, kind of like what people do at home. Yeah. So I'm obviously biased when it comes to electric vehicles because I like the technology. But I really love the convenience of having a vehicle that you can wake up to that's completely charged. So my wife and I, we own a Chevy Bolt, and my wife has not gone to a gas station in 2 years. And she's like absolutely happy about that. Like she's like, I will never, ever, ever go back. Right? I sometimes have to go because I drive the other car, and honestly, I don't like it. I'm kind of resentful that I have to do it, right? So the technology is not perfect yet, and we're still working to try to figure out the infrastructure, but it has its benefits. So the other part, so I mentioned there is a $7.5 billion program, 5 to build the fast charging stations, and the 2.5 that is competitive funding. So that is to build. You could build fast charging stations along corridors if a municipality, a state, a county feels like they need more of those. But you can also build community charging. And community charging is charging stations that are my dream for community charging is charging stations that are on every main street, right? Next to the restaurant, next to the local shop, next to anything that sells anything. So when people are traveling and they need to charge their electric vehicles, they stop for an hour or two, they get a charge, they go to the restaurant, spend some money, they go to the shop and spend some money, they leave some money in the local economy. That's kind of my dream for electric vehicle charging. And that's probably the biggest thing for me when it comes to the community charging program, that is going to give communities money to build infrastructure to help them attract people that right now don't have a reason to stop by. Right? So that's kind of my dream. That money is available now. So local government can go and apply for it. County government can go and apply for it. A state government can. School districts can. Technical colleges can. And the application is open until May 30th of this year. So there's $700 million available. So if you are connected with local government, county government, technical colleges, school districts that are looking for money to build electric charging station, this is the time to do it. And we're happy to help. So reach out. Yeah.
Okay, just on Sunday, I talked to one of the assistant principals at our local high school. I asked him about charging stations at the high school. He said, well, if we could find the funding,
The funding is available.
so I should just put him in touch with who to learn more.
With me.
Okay, all right.
And then I'm going, yes.
So for the charging, let's talk about corridors.
Yeah.
Some private company would have to build it. So out at MREA, the fairgrounds out there, they have a 50 kilowatt, I think, charger. Is that the standard that they're looking for fast charging, or is it just level 2?
No, the standard is 150 kilowatt.
Okay, so level what is it?
No, that's level 3.
A level 3.
Yeah. So, quick course on electric vehicle charging. It's level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 it's your plug. Just the thing that you use at home to plug your TV, your cell phone. That's what I use at home, right? And we have been using that for 2 years. It works fine because we don't travel far. So we have about a 30, 40-mile radius where we go. So we plug it, and it's always charged, and then we let it fall to 40%, and then we plug it again. It works just fine. So that's the cheapest, simplest way to do, because if you have a garage or an outlet on your driveway that you use for your lawnmower or whatever, that works for your electric vehicle too. That's the easiest, cheapest way to charge an electric vehicle. Then there is level 2, and level 2 is one of these guys. So these charging stations, they cost anywhere from $300 to as much as you want to spend on them. But yeah, $300 to $1,000. And you can install those on your garage or anywhere in your house, and then they charge your vehicle relatively fast. Like they can fully charge it overnight. And then there is level 3 charging, which is the fast charging stations, the ones that we were talking about on that map with the green lines, with the highways. You can charge your electric vehicle on one of those anywhere from 15 minutes to 40 minutes, depending on how fast your vehicle takes the electricity. Some vehicles take it super fast. 15 minutes, they go from 0 to 80%. Some take 40 minutes. That depends on the vehicle, but that's kind of like being at a gas station where you just plug in. I actually borrowed one of those expensive electric vehicles the other day, and I went to a charging station, and I was impressed because ours is not that expensive, so it takes a little bit longer to charge. This one, it was just like 15 minutes and it was full, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. But that's where the technology is going. Okay, so we talk about electric vehicle charging station. Now we're going to talk about my favorite program, the Clean School Bus program. Are you guys familiar with the Clean School Bus program? All right, so why I want to talk about Clean School Bus program? Because we have $5 billion to buy buses. So they're basically free buses right now. They're basically free buses. And compared to typical diesel buses, electric buses are cleaner, and they're cheaper to operate. So they have been cheaper to operate for a long time, but school districts just cannot afford them because they're about $350,000. So you save that money over the life of the bus, but it's hard to come up with $350,000. That's why the federal government is giving each district up to $375,000 so they can go and buy one. All right, so why school buses? Well, we get a lot of school buses out, 3 billion miles, 25 million children. It's a lot of kids. They create pollution. Children are vulnerable because their lungs are still developing, and the air inside of the bus can be actually dirtier than outside. Not a great way to send kids to school. The solution, electric buses, they can cut emissions, and they're about 60% cheaper to operate. So this program was announced last year, and basically the idea is to replace all buses with electric buses or propane. You can also apply for propane. I will highly recommend if a district is taking the steps to replace their buses, go from diesel to electric, because going from diesel to propane is replacing an imported fuel by another imported fuel, and the federal government doesn't care if you ask for propane or electric. ask for electric. Get the best option you can get. Basically, any school district that does their transportation themselves is eligible. Non-profit school transportation associations are eligible. Contractors are eligible. So if a school district does not own their buses, but they contract with a company that does the school district can apply on behalf of the contractor and give the buses to the contractor. So those entities are eligible. And then obviously Indian tribe and tribal organizations. So it's a very simple application. It's a lottery system. So it's a simple application. You go online, you fill it. The federal government has prioritized rural and low-income school districts. So the Madison School District is not in this list. So, you know, rural communities and low-income communities have an advantage when it comes to this. And then, in fact, there were 198 school districts in the list. And here's a map. So that map shows the distribution of the school districts. I don't think your school district was prioritized, but there are school districts around it that are. Districts can ask for up to $375,000 per bus, and they can ask for 25 buses at a time if they want, 1 to 25. One school district in Wisconsin asked for 12, and they got 12. And then they get $20,000 to install the charging station for each bus. So each bus comes at $375 plus $20,000 for the charging station. Or you can apply for $30,000 to $45,000 if you want to do propane or natural gas. Again, why not do electric? So last year we were super lucky that 65 of our school districts in Wisconsin got selected. So $25.6 million for electric buses in Wisconsin. They have to submit their purchase order in 2 weeks just to say, hey, we're good to go. We're going to get the buses. And they need to receive the buses. They need to buy them by October of 2024. Here's a map showing where those buses are going. Remember the 12 I mentioned? Right here. It's somewhere around Minocqua. Like there are 3 school districts around Minocqua. They got 10, 10, and 12. So that part of the state is going to get 32 electric school buses by next year. Now, these buses are $375,000 because that's what the dealers are asking for now. So I have looked at some of the invoices. So the school districts are going to pay $0. Now, they're also going to get $20,000 for the charging stations. And that's where school districts are kind of running into trouble because they have to upgrade their utilities, right? And some of the utilities are just starting to kind of understand the dynamics of this. So they're saying, well, you have to pay $20,000 to upgrade your transformer because now you need more power. So we're talking to utilities to find ways to make that an easier transition for districts because it benefits the utility also. So it's not a perfect situation. And some people say, well, it's not a free bus if we have to spend $20,000 to get the charges. But if you have to spend $20,000 to get $1 million worth in buses, maybe it's not a bad deal. So here's what's coming. Oh, and here's the list of the school districts. See, I don't know if you recognize any of those, but yeah. And then I know this is very small to read, but I can also share that PowerPoint with you, and you can send it to people. But yeah. So all over the place, all over the state. So I'm super excited because next year, in the fall of next year, we will have some of these buses that we can show people. So people can see that they actually work. Because right now there's a lot of fear that, well, it's too cold for electric school buses. Well, guess what? They have been operating in Michigan for 3-4 years. And Michigan is just as cold. You know, they have one in Alaska they've had for like 5 years, and it gets a little bit colder there than here. And it was funny because I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said, well, it's fine if you're gonna have them to do 30-mile route, but then when you have to take, you know, a 300-mile route, then it becomes a problem. And I was thinking, these are school buses. If you have to send your kids 150 miles each way, you don't need a bus, you need a new school, right? Because, you know, so I think people sometimes, you know, yeah, they should be able to go 150 miles, but it's a school bus. You're taking kids to school. They shouldn't be on the bus for more than 60 miles, and even that is a lot, right? And these buses right now, they range in the winter, so the range is normally between 100 and 150 miles. In the winter, it might drop to 80 to 120, but that's still plenty, right? So anyway, so what's happening next? Because this school district got lucky last year. Next year, we're gonna have, and I'm running, yeah, anyway. So the EPA is going to release another round of funding for that lottery system at the beginning of May. So school districts need to prepare and send their application if they are in the priority list. If your district is not in the priority list, which I believe is your case, the EPA, which is the agency that's coordinating that program, will open up a round of grant application that's open to everybody. So even if you're not in priority list, you can still compete for the buses. And the school district needs to start assembling their teams. Like, talk to your utility, talk to other school districts, and see if you can partner and do this together. So that's, so yeah, talk to your transportation contractors, talk to your utility, partner with other school districts, educate your community, talk to your people about why school districts are good for the community. That money that you're going to save on diesel fuel, you can spend on iPads and books and whatever you need for actually teaching kids. There is additional funding opportunities, so those utility upgrades that need to be made, there is money to do that. You just have to go and look for it. And then contact us if you have questions. So we talk about the first federal law, the infrastructure law. Why am I talking about that? Because it's good for people, it's good for the planet. It improves transportation for a lot of people, including children. It makes our infrastructure more resilient, and it also it will help us upgrade our infrastructure to deliver clean, reliable energy across the country and to deploy cutting-edge energy technology to achieve a zero emissions future. So I made it through half. All right, so the Inflation Reduction Act, this is more relevant to you because this gives tool to you to actually access some of this funding. So here's what we're gonna go through it. That is a $370 billion bill to promote private investments in infrastructure, reducing the cost of constructing and creating new jobs. There is an organization called Rewiring America, and they have a calculator that helps you determine how much money you can get from this bill. The estimate is that just an average household can save about $1,800 a year if you do the things that you can do through this bill. About $1,800 a year in energy costs through utility bills and then fuel savings if you decide to purchase an electric vehicle. So what this bill provides is discounts for heat pumps, and a heat pump is basically a furnace that works on electricity. Tax credits for solar systems, heat pumps, electric vehicles, and then the possibility of low-cost financing. If you're going to make upgrades to your home and you don't have all that cash, the government is creating these things called green banks that allow you to access low-cost financing to do your projects. So how can you take advantage of this bill? You can electrify things. You can electrify your appliances, and you don't have to do this right now. You don't have to take your working oven, throw it away, and buy an electric oven, no. You can do this as things break. So if your furnace breaks, instead of going and getting a new furnace, explore getting a heat pump instead, right? So that's one way to do it, because this program is here for 10 years. So these funds are going to be here for the next 10 years. You can, basically electrify. So when I talk about electrify, here are the things that you can do. You can buy an electric vehicle. You can switch your water heater to a heat pump water heater, which is an electric water heater. You can replace your gas stove with an induction stove, and I know that is very controversial, but we can talk after this about induction stove. They work. You can change your dryer for an electric dryer, a heat pump dryer. You can change your furnace for a heat pump, and you can add solar system. So all of these things there have incentives associated with that. So if you buy any of those things, you can get either a rebate or a tax credit over the next 10 years. This is very small, so it's just a picture to show you what the calculator looks like, but I'm going to give you the website you go to, and then once you open it, it looks like that, and it gives you the amount that you can save based on your location and your income. So here's an example of how people are going to take advantage of this. So here's a family, the Garcia family, and they want to have they want to take advantage of these incentives and programs. So they make a plan of things that they have to replace in their home. So, and they make it by the year. So in 2023, they decide that they need a new car, and they're going to replace their gasoline car with a used electric vehicle. That vehicle is going to cost $17,000, and the government is going to give them a rebate of $4,000, which means that their vehicle is going to cost $13,000 in the end. Then, also in 2023, they are going to upgrade their electrical panel because they want to electrify their home. They want to make sure that the house can handle it. That is going to cost them $2,500. The government is going to give them $1,250, and they have to pay $1,250. So that's how this bill works, basically. You replace something in your house, you make it electric, you get a rebate or you get a tax credit. In 2024, they replace their gas range with an induction stove. It's $1,300. They get a $650 rebate. They only pay $650. The next year, in 2026, their gas furnace breaks, and they have to replace it. It costs $12,000. They get a $6,000 credit, and then they get a tax credit on top of that of $1,800. So they end up paying $4,200 on a piece of equipment that's $12,000, right? So that's a big, big discount. So that's basically the idea. If something in your house breaks, you can replace it. Make sure that you check what rebate is available. Make sure that you check what tax credit is available, and then go get that. So same thing here in 2027. They replace their water heater. $3,000 cost. They only pay $1,050. So at the end of 10 years, they have invested almost $60,000 in their home, stuff that they have to replace anyway because that stuff breaks, and they only pay about $35,000. This is another example, same way, but just going to electric vehicles. There are tax credits for electric vehicles, so if you buy a new one, make sure that you check that the vehicle qualifies, but you can get up to $7,500. If you buy a used one, you can get up to $4,000. And then for the commercial tax credit, there is a mistake on that last line. Is up to $7,500 as well. So if you own a business and you need a truck for your business, you can get an electric truck and get $7,500 credit for that. Fate Technologies, which is a Wisconsin company, I don't know if you're familiar with it. They're over on the Neenah area. They have been replacing all their trucks with electric trucks because it saved them a lot of money, and they get the tax credit. Here's a quick comparison of one of my favorite electric vehicles, the F-150 electric. And if you compare that The fuel cost for a gasoline F-150, it's about $3,500 a year, assuming that you drive 16,000 miles. To drive the same amount of miles, charging that truck at home, it costs you $1,100 a year. So about $2,400 a year savings on the fuel. Basically, it requires no maintenance. You have to rotate the tires. That's it. No oil changes. Not really a lot of moving parts. You have to rotate the tires and put tires when they wear out. And then it has the $7,500 credit. And it's not that much more expensive. It's about $45,000 now. That was the price last year. They increased the price to $45,000 now. They're hard to come by because everybody wants them. So, but if that's something you want to do, it's an option. If you want a used vehicle, I pulled this out of the internet a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. So I actually own one of these, the Chevy Bolt. And a comparable gasoline car is about $17,000. The electric one is about $20,000, so $3,000 to $4,000 difference. But you can get $4,000 tax credit, and then you start saving on fuel from day one. So when we switch our electric vehicle, our Subaru to the Bolt, we started saving about $80 a month every month, just because we were paying $110 a month on gas. Now we pay $30 a month on electricity. So the idea being here, yeah, you might pay $3,000 to $4,000 more to get the same vehicle, the electric version of it, but you will get the tax credit and you will save on fuel. So 2 to 4 years, you break even and then you start. So this is 2 to 4 years before the tax credit, right? After the tax credit, you start basically making money on day one. So in short, the Inflation Reduction Act is good for people, it's good for the planet. It improves health and well-being. It saves people money. So, few things I want you to take away from here. I'm sorry that I have to rush it in the end, but so think about energy efficiency. We have a wonderful energy efficiency program in the state. It's called Focus on Energy. Check it out. They give you free light bulbs and free stuff that you can use in your home to make it more energy efficient. Make sure that you know what options you have available. If your furnace breaks, think about getting a heat pump. It's going to save you money. Electric vehicles are a great way to save money, and there are incentives available now. There are incentives available for school buses, and then there are incentives available for electric vehicle charging stations. So if you're thinking about doing any of these things, feel free to reach out. I can give you more information. So this is the calculator I referred to earlier, and I can if you want to talk to me after this, I can help you find out the website. But yeah, it just tells you how much you can save. And then, we have a website and we send a newsletter at the end of the month. If you're interested in learning more about this stuff, feel free to subscribe to the newsletter, check out our website. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. I'm sorry, I ran a lot longer. I talk a lot more than I thought I would.
I'm ready with my contractor to put in a heat pump and a new furnace. But I know Focus on Energy is going to give me $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
The feds, that's a 30% back on my taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the state, as I understand, the feds gave the state a pot of money, and the PSC gets to determine what they're going to do with that, like for heat pumps and that.
Yeah.
So you have that to be determined up there. Is that from the state, or what's holding up the state with this?
Yeah, the state has to decide who's going to manage that money, the federal money for the heat pump program. And the Public Service Commission just asked public comments on who people think should do it. And most everybody says it should be focused on energy. So the Public Service Commission will be making a decision on that over the next few weeks. The program won't be implemented probably until the fall, because it takes some time to put the infrastructure in place. So if you're doing your project now, you probably won't be able to get the IRA the IRA rebate for your heat pump. So if there is any way you could hold off a few months,
I'm not gonna do anything until I get the rebate.
right?
I mean, that would be silly.
Yes. So yeah, it's probably going to be in the fall when we know, and it's
Well, I mean, that's ridiculous because, people should be getting this done now.
Yes, but you have to understand that every state is different, and this is a big thing to do. And we are actually super lucky in Wisconsin that we have Focus on Energy program because we have that infrastructure in place. And if the PSC tells Focus, here's the money for the IRA heat pump implementation program, just deal with it, Focus will be able to do that in a couple of months. A lot of states don't have a statewide energy efficiency programs. So when they get that money, they're going to have to put that infrastructure in place from scratch. And that's going to be a lot of work. So I think Wisconsin, we're actually in a really good position. Once the PSC decides, it's going to take a few months to get it done. But the PSC just closed the comment periods 2 weeks ago. So they're going to be making decisions over the next few weeks. And then once they decide, yeah. So I understand your frustration, but we are actually in a relatively good place.
So any idea how much that's going to be?
Yeah, so the guidelines have been released. Depending on your income, you can get up to $8,000 rebate for a heat pump.
So you have no choice, but you have to wait.
Yeah, right now there is no option, really. I mean, nobody in the States, in the United States, nobody can access that money right now, right? It's just a lot of the things through the Inflation Reduction Act are like that the program has been announced, but it's either the federal government or the state just putting the infrastructure in place to implement it, because the funding is there, but you have to somehow manage it. Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of already answered my first question. I was going to ask if you know of any states who have access to that already, because you said Wisconsin's pretty well off, focused on energy. I was going to ask if there's any states that have access to that money.
Inflation Reduction Act? No, not yet.
My parents just, this is a little anecdote, bought a store and they replaced a kerosene furnace from the 40s, and they just ripped the whole thing out. I helped take it out in chunks out the front door, and that was in February. The place is in the ground, so it's not frozen. And they've been waiting to replace the furnace and get a heat pump, and my dad just laid the electrical for it, and I'm going to go home and tell him exactly to wait.
Yeah, it's the PSC has not announced their results of they have not announced their decision, but everybody said, please use Focus on Energy, so it's very likely that's going to happen through Focus on Energy. And once they give Focus the okay, Focus is just going to do it really quickly. So we'll have something by the end of the year, I think. It's just that, somebody has to give the okay, and they have to put the infrastructure in place. The interesting thing about the case is that your father, you said, is that your father cannot access Focus on Energy incentives to replace a kerosene furnace, because kerosene is not a regulated fuel in Focus on Energy. So you cannot take money from Focus on Energy to do something that replaces a fuel that Focus on Energy doesn't cover. That's one of the beauties of the Inflation Reduction Act, that it doesn't matter. He's still going to qualify because it's just putting a heat pump. It doesn't matter what you're replacing, you're putting a heat pump. So Focus on Energy in a way has been pretty limited, because that money is, the Focus on Energy funding is coming from ratepayers like you for electric and gas utilities. Kerosene don't pay into the Focus on Energy fund, so you cannot incentivize a kerosene replacement because you didn't pay into the fund, right? So, yeah, he needs to wait.
And it is a business, so if that's a private fund, it doesn't matter if it's personal or business.
Yeah, it should be fine. Yeah.
You mentioned heat pumps. You just briefly talk about the pros and cons of groundwater heat pumps versus air source heat
Oh, yeah. Okay, so who knows what's a heat pump? Do you guys have a refrigerator in your house? Yeah, so you have a heat pump. A refrigerator, modern refrigerators are heat pumps. Unless your fridge is like 30 years old. Do you have a 30-year-old fridge? If you have a modern refrigerator, that is a heat pump. And basically a heat pump, what it does is, that's why it has the word pump in it, because it works like a pump. A pump takes water from one place and dumps it in another place. A heat pump takes heat from one place and dumps it elsewhere. So when you put something hot on your fridge, it's not that a refrigerator knows how to cool, because we don't know how to cool things. What we do know how to do is how to remove heat from things, right? So when you put something inside your refrigerator, the refrigerator notices that it is kind of warm, and it just takes the heat and puts it outside. That's why if you walk behind your refrigerator, it's kind of warm. It's the heat that was inside the fridge is coming out. A heat pump is the exact same thing that you have underneath your fridge, just bigger, because your house is kind of a bigger refrigerator. But the beauty of a heat pump is that it works in reverse. It works both ways. So in the summer, when it's really hot inside your house, it's like the refrigerator. The heat pump takes the heat out and dumps it outside. In the winter, when it's cold in your house, and there is some heat outside, and there is heat outside even in the winter. So even when it's 0 degrees below, there is heat outside. Why? Because a heat pump has something magical called a refrigerant. And this is a liquid or a gas that is very, very, very cold. Like, have you used a spray can and you spray something and then all of a sudden the can gets really cold? There is a refrigerant there. So this substance can pick up, because it's so cold, it can always pick up heat. So even if it's 0 degrees outside, the refrigerant is cooler than 0 degrees. So any heat that's there, the difference between that very cold and 0 goes into the refrigerant. That's why the heat pump picks it up, and then it brings it into your house and makes your house a little bit warmer, and then go back outside and picks up a little bit more heat and brings it inside and makes your house a little warmer. And it does that until your house is 72 degrees and you're nice and cozy, right? And then it shuts off. So that is an air source heat pump. And it's called air source because it's looking for heat in the air, right? So if there was a heat pump right next to us right now, it will be picking up heat, and then it will be putting it somewhere else. A water source heat pump does basically the same thing, but picks up heat from the water. And what we usually do is we drill the hole. And Wisconsin is like the perfect place for water source heat pumps, because no matter how cold it is up here, if you go 10 feet below, it's the same it was in the summer, right? So it goes in the winter, the heat pump goes to the water down there and picks up heat and dumps it into your house and makes your house nice and cozy. And it doesn't have to work very hard because it's 60 degrees down there, right? So it's a perfect technology for Wisconsin because it doesn't have to work hard in the winter. An air source heat pump has to work hard in the winter to go pick up that little bit of heat and bring it in. Just have to go around and around and around and around. The water source just goes down once, picks up enough to warm up your house, dumps it, and it's done. The issue with water source heat pumps is that you have to drill a hole. And depending where you live, you might be able to do that or not. If you have a big yard, if drilling a hole is not a big deal, just go ahead and do it. It's going to cost you a little bit more. It's going to save you on the operation, but if you can afford it, it will save you long term. Air source heat pumps is just so easy to do. And heat pumps 20 years ago did not work in Wisconsin. Heat pumps 10 years ago, you have to actually look a really good one to find one that worked in Wisconsin. Right now, there is a new generation of heat pumps called cold weather or cold climate heat pumps that have been designed specifically for cold climates. So sometimes people would say, well, heat pumps don't work in the winter because it's 0 degrees outside and there is no heat out there. Yeah, they do. But it has to say cold climate heat pump. Vermont and Maine have a lot of them because Efficiency Maine and Efficiency Vermont are like the focus on energies of Maine and Vermont, and they have a lot of incentives for heat pumps because they have a lot of old homes with oil, right? And they want to get rid of that oil. So they have been pushing heat pumps for a while. And last winter, we had all these horrible storms and everybody was freezing. Those heat pumps are just like doing their thing. Yeah, I'm good. It's cold out, fine. I'm not worried. So there is a lot of examples of heat pumps working just fine in cold weather, but that is a new technology. Our installers are just kind of learning about that, and there is a lot of hesitancy. Some people will say, no, they don't work in cold weather. If somebody says that to you, say, well, make sure that it's a cold climate heat pump. If you just go and buy the regular one, they might not work well. But the ones designed for cold climate will. That was a long answer. Sorry.
What's the difference between tax credits and tax rebates?
Okay, so tax credits and rebates. So one has the word tax in it, and the other one doesn't. So a rebate is a discount that you get up front. And that's the thing that we're trying to figure out with the Inflation Reduction Act. Because the Inflation Reduction Act has both, has rebates and tax credits. A tax credit is something that you get when you do your taxes at the end of the year. So I did my taxes yesterday. I procrastinated. It was the last day. And if I had, so next year, so exactly a year from today, or from yesterday, when I go and do my taxes, if I install a heat pump from now through December 31st of this year, I can claim 30% of the cost in my taxes back, right? That is a tax credit. A rebate is when you go to purchase that heat pump, they will give you, whoever is selling it to you will give you a discount of up to, depending on your income, it could be up to $8,000. I mean, if you're very low income, it could be up to $14,000, right? But I think most people is kind of like $8,000. That is the reason why we're waiting for the Public Service Commission to decide who is going to administer that. Because somebody has to take that money and give it to somebody and say, hey, when somebody comes to buy a heat pump, give them a $3,000, $4,000, or $8,000 discount. Use this money to cover the cost, right? So that a rebate is an upfront discount. A tax credit is after the fact.
Yeah, and so if you pay very little in taxes, the tax credits aren't that great of an advantage.
Right. And that's something that people like me, are trying to talk. We're talking to people who make decisions about that. If you don't have the tax liability, the tax credit is not good for you. If you don't owe any taxes, well, you don't get your money back. So that is a sticking point. And I don't have the answers because it's one of my concerns as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Yeah, so a tax credit is something that you only get if you owe taxes. So, if at the end of the year, like yesterday when you did your taxes, your tax bill is zero, and you bought an electric vehicle last year and you get $7,500 tax credit, well, you got $0 because you don't owe any money, right? So that's one of those things that we're still trying to figure out how to deal with. So for electric vehicles, it's a little bit different. They thought about it. It started in 2024. The dealer can claim the tax credit because they will have the tax liability, and they can give you that as a discount. So starting on 2024 for electric vehicles, they will have a, what do they call it? They call it, I forgot the technical name, but it's basically, they can turn the tax credit into an upfront discount because whoever is selling you the vehicle can claim the credit on the back end, right? And that's particularly important for used electric vehicles because, a lot of low-income families, well, they don't have the tax bill. So they want to save that $4,000 when they go buy the vehicle because it makes the vehicle $4,000 cheaper. The government might do the same thing for the heat pumps. We don't know yet. Any other questions?
So, about the school bus program.
Yeah.
So how did the schools hear about this, know about this program?
our webpage, I wrote a couple of articles last year when the program became available. It's going to become available again at the beginning of May. So, my info is on those fact sheets that's out there. If you write an email to info@Renew or anybody really at Renew and say, we want more information about the Clean School Bus Program,
Well, we have, I'm not part of the tribe, but we have the Ho Chunk Nation here, and I know that they have buses, and I just wonder, if they would qualify.
they do qualify. And so I'm happy to drive to anywhere and talk to people about school buses. I'm happy to help them fill out the application. I'm happy to do whatever. I just want to have some electric school buses in Wisconsin, right? So just if you give them our info, and our newsletter usually at the end of the month has kind of updates on stuff that are happening. So.
Any more questions? If not, I want to thank Francisco for dropping up from Madison this evening, and are you going to be sticking around for a little bit?
Yeah, I'm around for a little bit. You can come and come and take a look at the charging station. I can answer your questions. But a lot of you have. I don't know. We have a lot of homes in Wisconsin that have propane for heating. If you have propane, a heat pump might be a good thing for you. So, and a lot of homes also have electric resistant heat, like the baseboard heat. That is very expensive. A heat pump might be a good option for you. And the good thing about a heat pump is that it's a heater, like a furnace. It's also an air conditioner. So if you have propane heating, but you don't have air conditioning in your house, if you replace it with a heat pump, then you have a furnace and an air conditioner at the same time.
A lot of our systems are those forced air systems where the fan goes on and then the heat comes through the vents.
Yeah.
Does a heat pump work with that, or do you have to have electric baseboard heating to make that work?
The heat pump will replace either of those. So if you replace, so you can have a heat pump that actually the coil goes in your furnace, so you still have the fan and use your old ductwork. So you could replace it that way. Most heat pumps, especially if you don't have a huge home, most of the heat pumps have the unit that goes outside and then a unit that goes inside the house, and you can get one for each room, and it just delivers heat or cold air, hot or cold air specific to each room, and you don't have to have the baseboard. Like the baseboard goes away, and the fan for the furnace can also go away because you can get rid of your furnace.
As far as contractors, I'm not sure how many contractors who deal in heating and air conditioning know that much about heat pumps. And is there a way to find out who the contractors are that are very knowledgeable on this subject?
So the Focus on Energy program has a page on. So the contractors that work with Focus on Energy are called Trade Allies.
Okay.
You can go to the Focus on Energy program website, and they have a little box that says find a contractor. Okay. And if you click there, it asks you what kind of service you want, like if you want a furnace or and then it asks you for your zip code, and it gives you the list of the contractors they have.
Okay, thanks.
I know Tri-City Refrigeration.
I am actually surprised to see how much contractors actually know about heat pumps. It's just that I don't think they are out there talking about it. But last year I was camping with my family, and we stayed at the campsite, and the administration building had a heat pump in it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I talked to the owner, and it's like, oh yeah, we've had it for a couple of years. It works great. My mom had one in her house, and that's the reason why we put this one here, because hers works great. And I was like, wow, you people have been doing this for a while, and nobody's talking about it. So it's being done, and I hope that people take advantage of these incentives to do it more.
Would the contractors who are on that page also know about the rebates or tax incentives?
I imagine they probably know something is coming, but now we don't know what it's going to look like. But the moment it becomes an offer through Focus on Energy, they should know.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so be patient.
Yeah. Yeah. Through the end of the year, you know, I imagine in the fall we'll know something.
The money available for the car charging,
Yeah.
is that open to, like, so to my school, Mid-State?
Yeah, so a lot of ways to go about that. If you want to build charging stations for like a bus fleet, a school can apply for that. There are some conditions, and I think one of them is that they have to make it publicly accessible. Municipalities, like, you know, the town can apply to get money to get charging stations in the town. The town doesn't have to own them. They don't have to operate them. They can contract with somebody and say, hey, here's money to build charging stations. We as local government entity apply for the money, but we cannot operate it or own it. You get to pay 20%, and then you own the whole thing forever.
And that's the 80-20 deal?
That's the 80-20 deal, yeah.
So we right now have 6 stage 2 chargers over at Mid-State on campus.
Mhm.
But it'd be cool to get some more stuff out into the community, you know, and maybe we could be a part of that.
Yeah, and you can apply. And you know, we'll be happy to work with you if that's something that you're interested in doing. It could be a source of revenue.
Sure. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, this program was recorded, and so if you know people who haven't had a chance to attend this evening, it's going to be on Wisconsin Rapid community media sometime, but it's not on their schedule yet. So.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, thank you for coming.